HRT 210 ServSafe exam. What information must be posted on a dishwasher? Correct settings. What is the proper way to put on disposable gloves? Hold them by the edges. A person infected with norovirus could remain contagious for several days after symptoms are gone. Which of these is the best option for cooling large amounts of hot food quickly? A. Plastic container submerged in ice. B. Refrigerated cooler. C. Blast chiller. D. Ice paddle. C. A blast chiller. How much soap should be applied during the handwashing process? Enough to build up a good lather. An inspection report for an approved supplier should review. Receiving and storage. What is a characteristic required for equipment to meet NSF standards? Non-absorbent. What temperature should the water be for manual dishwashing? Must be at least 110 F. Leaving a running hose submerged in a mop bucket could result in backsiphonage. Which responsibility is included in the Food and Drug Administration's role? A. Inspecting meat, poultry, and eggs. B. Approving HACCP Plan. C. Regulating food transported across state lines. D. Issuing licenses and permits. C. Regulating food transported across state lines. Why are elderly people at high risk for foodborne illness? Immune systems weaken with age. Which item should be rejected? A. Bags of organic cookies in torn packaging. B. Bottled milk at 41 F. C. Shell eggs at an air temperature of 45 F. D. Live oysters at 50 F. A. Bags of organic cookies in torn packaging. A foodborne illness is considered an outbreak when 2 or more people have the same symptoms of illness after eating the same food, and an outbreak is confirmed by a laboratory. About 20 to 35% of healthy adults carry which type of pathogen on their skin? Staphylococcus aureus. If a power outage impacts an operation and causes food in storage to enter the temp danger zone for 16 hours, what must be done with the food? Throw it out. When thawing frozen TCS food under running water, what should the temp of the running water be? 70 F or lower. When using a microwave oven for reheating TCS food for hot holding, the internal temp of the food must reach at least 165 F for 15 seconds. Spoons or scoops used to serve food such as ice cream or mashed potatoes can be stored under running water that is at least 135 F. What is the minimum internal cooking temp and time for shell eggs that will be served immediately? 145 F for 15 seconds. Which of these is considered a common food allergen? A. Watermelon. B. Asparagus. C. Lobster. D. Bacon. C. Lobster. What is an obstacle to food safety? Staff language differences. Once water has been restored after water service interruption, a manager should verify that the water supply is drinkable. To support food safety, what is an operations manager responsible for monitoring? Staff handwashing practices. When partially cooking TCS food during prep, the initial cooking time should not exceed 1 hour, 60 minutes. What does FAT-TOM stand for? Food, acidity, temp, time, oxygen, moisture. What is the first step in developing a HACCP plan? Conduct a hazard analysis. At a minimum, how often should food temp be checked? At least every 4 hours. What should be done with food that has been handled by a food handler who has been restricted or excluded from the operation due to illness? Throw it out. Which food items need time and temperature control for safety? Milk. What type of eggs must be used when preparing raw or undercooked dishes for high-risk populations? Pasteurized eggs. What should an operation do if there is suspicious activity or a threat? Immediately contact a regulatory authority. What personal hygiene should food handlers practice before arriving at work? Shower/bathe. What is the correct way to operate a dishwashing machine? Scrape, rinse, or soak items before washing them. Clipboards with forms for recording time and temp info should be posted near prep areas, next to cooking and holding equipment, and near coolers and freezers. What symptom requires a food handler to be excluded from the operation? Jaundice. The best way to protect food from deliberate contamination is to make it as difficult as possible for someone to tamper with it. What is the first object that should be visually inspected upon arrival of a food shipment? Delivery vehicle. Which is a ready-to-eat food? A. Washed carrots. B. Chicken. C. Shellfish. D. Shell eggs. A. Washed carrots. What should the manager know about developing a cleaning program? A master cleaning schedule should include who, what, when, and how cleaning should be done. What temperature must stuffed lobster be cooked to? 165 for 15 seconds. Which statement about handwashing stations is true? A. Reusable cloth towels are an acceptable substitute for disposable paper towels. B. Water used in handwashing stations must be drinkable. C. Liquid soap is the only type of soap that should be provided. D. Dirty kitchenware may be cleaned in handwashing stations, except those in restrooms. B. Water used in handwashing stations must be drinkable. What happens if ventilation systems are not working correctly? Grease and condensation builds up on walls and ceilings. When is a microwave oven an approved method for thawing frozen food? When the food will be cooked in an oven immediately after thawing. What is the proper way to transport multiple clean glasses? Upside down in a rack or on a tray. A manager who needs to buy an oven for his or her operation should look for an oven with what mark? NSF. What is the minimum internal cooking temperature for chicken breast? 165 F. What should a food handler do to make gloves easier to put on? Select the correct size gloves. When should a food handler remove his/her apron? When leaving prep areas. Which is a common type of chemical sanitizer? A. Iodine. B. Fluorine. C. Barium. D. Arsenic. A. Iodine. Why are transplant recipients at high risk for foodborne illnesses? They have compromised immune systems. After chopping up raw chicken on a cutting board, it is essential that the board is washed, rinsed, and sanitized. What practice should be used to prevent seafood toxins from causing a foodborne illness? Purchasing food from approved, reputable suppliers. A food handler has cooled a container of chili to 70 F in 1 hour. How much time is left to cool the chili to 41 F? 5 hours. An effective HACCP systems must be based on a written plan, which is a necessary condition for holding cold TCS food without temp controls. A. Hold food at 70 F or lower before removing it from the cooler. B. Allow guests or staff to take home leftover food after 8 hours. C. Label the food with the item name, caloric content, nutrients, and allergens. D. Serve the food within 6 hours of holding at 70 F or lower. D. Serve the food within 6 hours of holding at 70 F or lower. Which of these tools is best suited to measure the temp of a griddle? A. Air probe. B. Time temperature indicator. C. Infrared thermometer. D. Bimetallic stem thermometer. C. Infrared thermometer. A sink that is correctly designed and installed usually has 2 air gaps. Dirty water from mop buckets should be disposed of in a floor drain. A restaurant manager has reason to believe that a recent shipment of green onions may be linked to a foodborne illness outbreak. What should be done with the remaining unused product from the shipment? Segregate it. What should a food handler do with food after it is thawed in the microwave? Cook it using conventional cooking equipment. If grilled chicken is removed from the grill at 1 p.m., what discard time should be written on its container if it is held without temp control? 5 p.m. When soaking items in hot water to heat sanitize them, what is the minimum temp required? 171 F. If a hand antiseptic is used, when is the correct time to apply it? After hand washing. Active managerial control is not reactive, but rather is proactive. Which is an example of physical contamination? A. Cooking tomato sauce in a copper pan. B. Sneezing on food. C. Touching dirty food contact surfaces. D. Bones and fish. D. Bones and fish. When storing multiple, raw items in a cooler, what item should be placed on the lowest shelf? Poultry. As part of active managerial control, food handlers are typically monitored by managers to ensure that they are ensuring that all types of TCS food are cooked to the required temps. Who should provide info about private water supply inspections, testing, and other requirements for a food service operation? Local regulatory authority. Which statement about outdoor garbage containers is true? A. Containers should be kept covered at all times. B. Drain plugs should be removed except when transporting them. C. Containers should have loose-fitting lids. D. They should be located on porous surfaces, such as grass or dirt. A. Containers should be kept covered at all times. The 5 most common food handling mistakes include purchasing food from unsafe sources, failing to cook food correctly, holding food at incorrect temps, using contaminated equipment, and practicing poor personal hygiene. What role does the kitchen staff have in preventing allergic reactions? Ensuring that there is no cross-contact with allergens. Most hot holding equipment cannot be used to reheat food because the equipment cannot pass through the temp danger zone quickly enough. Some regulatory authorities allow food handlers to drink from a covered container while in prep and dishwashing areas. It is acceptable to recondition food, rather than dispose of it, if it was Held in the temp danger zone for less than 2 hours. After 4 hours, a server checked the holding temp of the chicken soup to be 125 F. What should be done with the soup? Throw it out. Which would be an appropriate step to ensure that staff members do not hide illnesses from management? Require all employees to sign statements agreeing to report any illnesses to management. What does color coding equipment and utensils do for food handlers? Assist in preventing cross-contamination. Which is an example of a food safety program that an operation must have? A. Glassware and dishware procurement program. B. Patron practitioner program. C. Supplier selection and specification program. D. VIP specialization program. C. Supplier selection and specification program. What practice can help prevent allergic reactions? Identifying ingredients for customers. Which area of the operation usually has the brightest lighting requirement? Prep area. What must an operation do if it suspects a foodborne illness outbreak? Report the illness to the regulatory authority. How often should clean-in-place equipment be sanitized? Every day unless otherwise indicated. Which is an example of how food can become unsafe? A. Employees wash their hands after using the restroom. B. Prep tables are wiped down with a side towel between uses. C. Wiping cloths are stored in a sanitizer solution between uses. D. Food contact surfaces are washed, rinsed, and sanitized. B. Prep tables are wiped down with a side towel between uses. The label on the original container supplied by the manufacturer of a chemical used in a food service operation must include directions for use. Where is it allowed for food handlers to eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum or tobacco? In designate areas away from prep areas. Food that has remained in the temp danger zone for 4 or more hours must be thrown away. Which surfaces must be cleaned and sanitized? A. Storage shelves. B. Walls. C. Garbage containers. D. Cutting boards. Cutting boards. How often should cleaning tasks be checked against the master cleaning schedule? Daily. To prevent contamination, supplies should be stored away from walls. A manager arrived one morning to find that an overnight key drop delivery of beef had been left outside the cooler. What should the manager do? Notify the supplier that the shipment is being rejected. What thermometer is best suited to checking a dishwashing machine's final rinse temperature? Maximum registering thermometer. Coleslaw that was prepared and stored on July 5th would have a discard date of July 11th. When washing dishes in a 3-compartment sink, the water and detergent in the first sink of a 3-compartment sink needs to be changed when the water becomes dirty or when the suds are gone. When should a food handler with a sore throat and fever be excluded from an operation? If the operation primarily serves a high-risk population. Which type of probe would be used to check the internal temp of food? Penetration. A food handler is prepping a seafood dish on April 4th, using shrimp and scallops. The shrimp has a use-by date of April 8th, and the scallops have a use-by date of April 10th. What is the use-by date for the seafood dish? April 8th. What is the maximum amount of time that hot TCS food may be hot held without temp control? 4 hours. For types of pathogens that can contaminate food and cause foodborne illness are bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi. Which of these groups is considered a part of a supply chain? A. Packers. B. Servers. C. Regulators. D. Customers. A. Packers. Indoor garbage containers must be leak-proof, pest-proof, and waterproof.